Frontline Updates, where we delve deep into military strategies and updates from conflict zones. Today, we're discussing the progress of the ongoing special military operation as of today. I'm your host, Shariefa Muhammad MGT.
I'm Colonel A.C. Oguntoye, an infantry officer.
Today's Russian Ministry of Defense summary marks the 81st Victory Day anniversary. The Russian force posture was ordered into a strict ceasefire, with all groupings remaining on previously occupied lines. Despite the declared truce, the report alleges 16,071 Ukrainian violations in 24 hours, 676 artillery, MLRS, mortar, and tank strikes, 6,331 UAV attacks, and 8 ground assaults. Violations struck positions in Crimea, Belgorod, Kursk, Kaluga, Rostov Oblasts, and Krasnodar Krai. Russian retaliation was doctrinally symmetric, limited to counterfire against enemy gun lines, command posts, and UAV launch sites. No Russian offensive airstrikes, missile, or deep artillery missions were conducted. A deliberate operational restraint. The cumulative campaign attrition figures were restated, underscoring a grinding war of material.
Welcome to Frontline Updates, the podcast that brings you in-depth insights into military operations from those leading them on the ground. Today, we're joined by Colonel A.C. Oguntoye, an infantry officer monitoring critical missions on the progress of the special military operation as of today. Colonel Oguntoye, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been an eventful day, and despite the holiday, the troops remained extremely busy.
Colonel, the headline figure from today's brief is staggering. 16,071 ceasefire violations were recorded. Walk us through what that number actually represents and how the Russian forces responded.
Let's deconstruct that figure, because violation here isn't a single shot fired. It's any kinetic event, every artillery round, mortar bomb, MLRS rocket, tank shell, and above all, every unmanned aerial vehicle sortie that entered our defended airspace or struck our positions. Over the 24-hour period, the armed forces of Ukraine conducted 676 shellings from tube artillery, multiple rocket launchers, mortars, and tanks. Alongside that, we recorded an enormous 6,331 UAV attacks, a mix of FPV strike drones, reconnaissance platforms, and loitering munitions. Additionally, there were 8 ground assaults, what we classify as platoon to company-sized attacks, on our lines. Now, the response was dictated by the Commander-in-Chief's directive. We remained on our occupied positions, strictly observing the ceasefire. But when you're taking fire, inaction is not an option.
Symmetric retaliation, that's a very specific doctrinal choice. Can you unpack why that approach was selected instead of a broader punitive strike?
The operational art here is about maintaining the political military narrative of a ceasefire, while denying the enemy the ability to exploit it. A symmetric response means you answer a howitzer battery with counterfire onto that howitzer battery, not by leveling a corps headquarters or a rear supply depot. It keeps the exchange proportional under international humanitarian law's lens and prevents the adversary from manufacturing imagery of supposed Russian massacres during a truce. From a pure infantry perspective, it's also the most efficient way to immediately silence the weapons that are killing your men. You're cutting the kill chain right at the firing point, preserving your own combat power for the next phase of operations.
Let's go sector by sector, starting with the North Group of Forces. This group struck deep into Sumy region and across the border in Kharkiv. What happened there?
The Northern Grouping operates across a complex frontier, where Ukrainian forces consistently attempt to position artillery and multiple rocket launchers within range of our border regions. Today, in retaliation for incoming fire, we hit 2 mechanized brigades around Andreevka and Malaya Korchakovka in Sumy Oblast, and mechanized, motorized, and territorial defense units in the Volchansky, Kutory, Veternarno, and Pokolyano areas of Kharkiv. The results: around 80 enemy personnel killed, a combat armored vehicle, 5 soft-skinned vehicles, a multiple rocket launcher, 2 anti-aircraft missile systems, and, critically, 3 electronic warfare stations. For an infantryman like me, the destruction of those EW and air defense assets is often more significant than the body count. Each EW station can neutralize an entire company's worth of drones, and each SAM system threatens our close air support and reconnaissance. Removing them opens a window for better targeting.
Moving to the West Group. The engagement here seemed more contained, around Mayaki in the Donetsk People's Republic. Walk us through that.
The West Group struck a mechanized brigade concentration near Mayaki. The enemy lost more than 60 servicemen, 2 armored combat vehicles, and, this is the telling part, 13 trucks. That's a very high vehicle loss relative to the troop count, which tells me we caught a logistics column or a resupply node in the midst of forward delivery. In positional warfare, logistics is the lifeblood. If you can consistently kill the trucks that bring ammunition, fuel, and rations to the line, the fighting effectiveness of the opposing battalion degrades exponentially. 13 trucks is roughly a company's worth of transport, and replacing that under persistent aerial surveillance is extremely difficult. This strike directly impairs the Ukrainian ability to sustain operations in that microsector.
Now, the Center Group. This was clearly the main effort, repelling 8 separate ground attacks. Give us the picture.
The Center Group faced the heaviest pressure of the day. Ukrainian formations threw a mixed force at our lines. 2 mechanized brigades, an airborne brigade, an assault regiment, a Marine infantry brigade, and no fewer than 3 National Guard brigades. These attacks were concentrated in the densely urbanized belt from Turetsk and Torsky down through Kucherov Yar, Kutuzovka, New Donbass, Belitsko, Rodinsko, and Novoalexandrovka. 8 distinct assaults were repelled. The enemy took over 290 killed, with 2 armored vehicles, 11 more trucks, and 2 artillery pieces destroyed. What's operationally significant here is the breadth of the attempted penetration. They weren't probing one spot. They were testing multiple points along the line simultaneously, likely looking for a seam between our brigade boundaries or a weak spot where a motorized rifle battalion might be under strength after months of combat. Our forces held because the defensive belts.
What does this concentration of assaults tell you about Ukrainian intent on that axis?
It signals that the Pakharovsk-Toretsk direction remains their operational priority. They're trying to build tactical momentum before the summer campaigning season fully matures. However, committing airborne and Marine infantry alongside National Guard formations suggests a shortage of dedicated assault troops. They're mixing elite with second-line units to mass combat power. That's a tell. An adversary that has to reach down its order of battle to generate mass is an adversary running out of its most capable offensive infantry. Still, we mustn't be complacent. 8 attacks in a day is a serious tempo, and our troop stamina is remarkable.
East Group, operating in the Zaporizhia region. Your forces struck near Rozovka and Vostvizhivka.
Yes, the East Group engaged an assault brigade and an assault regiment. This sector is less urbanized, more open steppe, which places a premium on long-range direct fire and counter-mobility. The enemy lost approximately 230 servicemen, 3 armored combat vehicles, and 10 trucks. That this was an assault formation means they were likely preparing or moving into assault positions when our retaliation caught them. The 10 trucks again point to logistics being targeted. In open terrain, if you lose your transport, you're left with dismounted infantry struggling to cross fire-swept ground without armored cover. The East Group's success here is a classic fire's defeat, attriting the enemy before he can close with our infantry lines.
Further south, the Dnieper Group. The numbers were smaller, 15 killed, 10 vehicles. But the mention of mountain assault brigades is interesting. What's the terrain dynamic there?
The Dnieper Group's area of responsibility along the Zaporizhia and Kherson fronts includes riverine and broken ground that favors light infantry, like mountain assault units. These brigades are highly mobile, but lightly armored, relying on speed and surprise. Today's engagement around Novoandreevka, Malyi Sherbaki, and Zaporozhets caught them moving, probably to a forward staging area. Killing 10 vehicles might seem minimal against the larger figures elsewhere, but for a mountain assault unit, that could represent a significant fraction of its organic transport. The Dnieper front isn't static. It's a constant cat and mouse of infiltration and counter-infiltration across the Dnieper Delta. Our forces maintained control and denied any lodgment.
Now, a domain we haven't touched directly, operational tactical aviation. Today, your briefing stated that fixed-wing aviation, strike UAVs, missile troops, and long-range artillery didn't launch any strikes. In a conflict where air power has been shaping the campaign, that's a massive departure. How do you view aviation's role, and what does today's stand-down signify strategically?
Operational tactical aviation is not a supporting arm. It's a campaign-shaping domain in its own right. Typically, our Su-25s, Su-34s, and Cav-52s are conducting on-call close air support, interdiction of reserves, and suppression of enemy air defenses to open corridors for deep strikes. Helicopter aviation in particular is the infantry commander's guardian angel. When a mechanized platoon is pinned down by a well-concealed tank, a Ka-52 with Vickers missiles removes that obstacle within minutes. Today, the decision to keep all fixed-wing and strike UAV assets on the ground and to hold the missile troops silent was a political signal of the highest order. It demonstrated that Russia was willing to observe an absolute ceasefire from its most potent strike capabilities, while reserving the right to defensively prosecute immediate threats with ground-based fires. This does not mean aviation was idle. I assure you, crews were on strip alert, engines warm. If the situation had escalated.
So you're saying the mere presence of our aviation, even unused, is shaping the battlefield?
Deterrence doesn't require a trigger pull. Every Ukrainian brigade commander knows that if he masses combat power for a breakthrough, he risks a devastating airstrike. That compels him to move in smaller packets, at night, under heavy electronic masking, all of which reduces the speed and mass he can generate. Aviation thus imposes constant friction on the enemy's campaign. Today, we withheld that hammer, but the anvil of ground-based fires still did its job.
Colonel, thank you for providing such a detailed briefing on the current military situation. Your insights are invaluable to our understanding of the conflict's dynamics. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Join us next time as we continue to provide up-to-date coverage on global military affairs. Stay with us for more updates and expert analyses on global defense and security issues. Stay informed, stay secure.
Thank you for the opportunity. I want to emphasize that what comes next depends on political guidance. But from a purely military standpoint, this static defensive posture can't last indefinitely. Once the ceasefire window closes, I would anticipate a transition from reactive symmetrical responses to preemptive fire strikes, likely aimed at enemy staging areas identified during this lull. Our force posture, heavily fortified, deeply echeloned, and logistically resilient, is well suited for either continuing the defense or pivoting to offensive operations elsewhere. The center group's experience today, absorbing 8 attacks and inflicting disproportionate losses, proves that our defensive architecture is working. But as any infantry officer will tell you, you don't win wars purely on the defense. At some point, you have to seize and hold the initiative. I believe our leadership is preparing that moment.
This has been Frontline Updates. Subscribe for daily military briefings and in-depth strategic analysis. Visit our platform for maps, transcripts, and exclusive Frontline updates from commanders in theater.